Just preparing. I'm gonna wait till I get the notification. All right, it looks like, oh man, you know what, Ben?
What's
It
that?
looks like we're live.
Nice.
Are we live right now? Is that happening? All right, well, hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Jake Sussman. It's been a crazy day on social media. Having posts, getting 500 shares, reaching over 100,000 people today. It has been a wild day for Jake Sussman social media. Anyway, if you're just joining us for the first time, I am a dyslexia and ADHD change maker on an unstoppable mission to give kids around the around the world a voice and help them change the way that we communicate to empower the neurodiverse community. I run a Facebook live show where I interview people from around the world, change makers, activists, leaders like Dr. Ben Powers himself, to help bring you information so that you can better parent your children and reach your students. I'm a speaker and the founder of Superpower Consulting, a global mentorship program that helps kids who have dyslexia and ADHD find their voice so they can advocate for their own needs. And here we are today. And I would love to get to know you. So if you're just tuning in with us now, please don't hesitate to share where you're from, where you're watching from, because let me tell you, there is nothing better than community. I said this last week, that the more you share, the more you get vulnerable. I could guarantee you that there is someone out there that is going through the same thing. We are all in this together. Now, did you know that the LD mind holds the key to our ever-changing world? That's right, your kids, your students. So join me tonight as we discuss the power of neurodiversity and creativity with renowned expert, Dr. Benjamin Powers, good friend and head of school at the Southport School, which is one of the top LD private schools in the country. Dr. Powers is also the director of Haskins Global Literacy Hub. Whoa. So we're going to be diving into all things dyslexia, creativity, the latest science, and ways that you can better parent and teach and understand your neurodiverse kids. So, Ben, welcome.
Hey, Jake. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, my friend. My pleasure. How you doing? How's it going?
You know, in spite of everything happening right now, I think, we've been able to deliver a consistent day in, day out job at our school. And so I think that's kind of been most critical on our agenda. So I'm feeling good about how we're doing with, in response to that. And I'm feeling good. We've got kids back in school after the holiday vacation. And I'm feeling good about what the future holds, Jake. There's a lot ahead for us. So
let me tell you something. 2022 is a big year for us, for the neurodiverse community. I feel it. I feel it. I know that the mayor of New York City is dyslexic. So we're talking about some big moves. All right. So again, if you're just tuning in with us now, please don't hesitate to post where you're from, where you're watching from, share this video, because tonight we're about to get super creative. So Ben, we were just talking earlier today, and you were telling me about this, what you've been learning with creativity and neurodiversity. So tell me about this.
Yeah. So, Jake, as you know, there's a lot of conversation around neurodiversity and what we call cerebrodiversity at school, and thinking about kind of the collective strength of our heterogeneity, of the fact that we have different kinds of minds, different kinds of thinkers, and that is, as the human race, we are stronger based on that collective, that notion of the collective, right? And, I'm thinking a lot about, especially in response to what's happened in the last couple of years, and you and I have talked about this, right? About how we educate kids, about how we think about their experience in the classroom, and thinking about what the future holds. And from my perspective, Jake, there are so many opportunities on the horizon for people who can think differently, who can engage differently, interact differently. And of course, our kids, or our community of kids with learning and attention issues like dyslexia, ADHD, for a variety of reasons, including the way they have to learn how to kind of navigate around their environment, they're primed to be really thinking about how to leverage those innate strengths as we think about what's coming down the pipeline for us.
Right, right. I mean, I would say that, doing the work with mentoring and working with these kids from all over the place, from all different ages, I will say that there is, how do I explain it? There's something that we're seeing when kids find their own confidence, right? When kids are finally feeling that they can embrace who they are, we're seeing that they can step forward into the realm of their creative thought, right? And once they're in that realm of creative thought, they can achieve things that all thought were impossible. I mean, I've seen it. I'm sure you see it all the time at the school. So, I mean, what do you think schools or parents should do to help kids better understand being creative?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jake, and I think you're absolutely right. I think when you think of creativity, what do you think of? What kinds of fields or jobs? What do you think about when you think about creativity?
I think of, I don't know, design. I think of an artist, musician, theater.
That's right, right. And so those are kind of typical ways we think about being in a creative field. And there are definitely fields like design, the things you just talked about, theater, dance, music, all those kinds of things that are by their nature based in creativity. But really, if you think about it, any kind of field, any kind of profession, any kind of science only moves forward through a creative mindset. Because if we just keep doing the same thing in the same way, we're not going to be able to bridge and create innovation. And so to get there, we need people who are creative. And if you think about some of the most amazing things that have been achieved, it's really either through somebody who has had that space to be creative or who's had the opportunity to kind of think outside and bridge different things together to create those opportunities. So, I think creativity is a huge lever. And when we have people who come into schools, and parents especially, I think they can get a little scared by that word, because if we go back to what you said are typically associated with creativity, I think a lot of parents are like, wait, how easy is it going to be for my child to be a musician? Or how easy is it going to be for them to be successful on stage? And sure, those are important risks for kids to take if they have a passion or an interest in those things. But we shouldn't be scared of that word creativity, Jake. I think when I hear you speak and when I listen to what you do when you mentor kids, I think you understand innately that, creativity is such an important factor. But I think a lot of people are scared of it because, it pushes people outside their comfort zone, and they're scared about the future. But creativity is at the root of our future, Jake.
Well, I mean, isn't creativity, like, by definition, breaking the rules?
That's a really good way to look at it, right?
Right?
Yeah. It's thinking about, novel approaches, different approaches, new approaches, and kind of going outside the box that we've put a problem or a person in, right?
Right. I mean, what's a better example of those who like breaking the rules in the neurodiverse community, right? I mean,
Sure.
it's and by the way, for those of you who are just tuning in with us, and if, let's say, this is a new thing for you, if you maybe just stumbled upon this, neurodiversity is a word that we're starting to use now because we believe that, at least I believe, and I'm sure Ben could agree, I don't necessarily see dyslexia, ADHD, and other learning attention challenges as a disability per se. We believe that every mind learns differently, no matter if you're neurotypical or not. So we had to think of a really good creative word that we can use that's not just learning disability. Right? So neurodiversity is great because, well, technically everyone learns differently, right? So anyway, just want to get a little side note if you're just tuning in with us. Right? I mean, when was the first time we started using that word? I think it's great. I think that we got to adopt that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the whole thought, the whole mindset of neurodiversity and thinking about the different attributes of how people learn or interact with their environments. It's really important, Jake, and I know you agree with this. It's really important to be creating environments, to be creating opportunities for every child, every adult to succeed based on the strengths, the relative areas of strength and the relative areas of weakness they might bring into that equation. And I think, I think when we think about kids or adults with dyslexia, ADHD, I mean, we know better today. We know so much more today about, why these things happen. We know they're genetic. We can literally do imaging studies, and that's part of the work that gets done at the Haskins labs in New Haven. We can do imaging work and really literally see across scans of multiple brains, different areas of activation in these brains. So we know these things are real. We know they exist. And I think at the end of the day, it's finding and creating different opportunities, changing environments, changing the landscape, and changing really at the end of the day the conversation for these kids so that they can flourish and really deliver on their potential. What's underneath that's going to, it really is going to fuel our next generation economy. And
it's gonna be crazy. I mean, so here's a big question for you, and I'm sure a lot of parents, and if you agree with me, post a little comment and let me know, because I am watching you. Okay, so if you do have questions, bear with me. There's a little bit of a delay. Okay, so please don't hesitate to ask away. Okay, this is big. So let's talk creativity versus video games. Okay, I want to talk about creativity versus technology. Okay, because I know that a lot of kids are obsessed with video games, right? And I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, when I was a kid, even we would just go outside, but now there's Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite. So as the head of school, of a middle school, elementary and middle school, like, do you think video games are hindering kids' creativity, or how can we optimize video games like Roblox, for example, to help kids become more creative? Or are they becoming more creative and we just don't understand?
Yeah, well, Jake, seriously, I mean, it's an important question. I think a lot of times, and look, I'm a parent, I've got 4 kids, and so we want to be conscious of things like screen time, but the reality is, and I, and we've had this conversation, Jake,
all the time.
I remember when my kids first started getting into Roblox, and I was hearing all about Roblox, and as of last summer, more than 50% of kids in America, more than half of the kids in our country were on Roblox. And, we have a choice in these spaces. Yeah, and, you said it, Jake, you played video games when you were a kid.
I played Dance Dance Revolution and Halo. My family, we would go be in Dance Dance Revolution competitions. We would be drenched in sweat. I'm telling you, that was my first exposure to the PlayStation.
Well, Jake, I'm going to make a shout out to your family. If anybody's got any videos of Jake doing Dance Dance Revolution, let's get them up online so we can all celebrate that. But yeah, Jake, I think, look, play is really important, and video games are a form of play. I mean, there's literally research that's been done where they've done learning exercises with kids and then had structured playtime after, and you can see differences in the outcomes of what those kids retain. So play is critically important, and play is really one of the key things at the root of what helps us keep a creative mindset. So all these things, and I think a lot of times, we're quick to say, oh, video games are bad. Well, there are so many opportunities. And, when I found out my kids were on Roblox, they were asking me to play. I have a choice as a parent or as an educator. Do I shut that conversation down, or do I open myself up and try to listen, understand, and be part of my kids' community? And that's what I chose to do. And what's been fascinating is just the amount of skills, from executive function skills like planning and organizing, initiating tasks, persevering through tasks, impulse control, design, there's so many things, teamwork. I mean, my kids will be on Roblox with kids all over the place, and they have to figure out in a real-time world, in a fast-paced environment, how to do all these things. So there's a huge amount of creativity there, Jake.
It's crazy. Yeah. I said this in my live last week, and I really suggest you all going back and watching, because it was really good. I'm biased. No, but one of my mentees taught me about aerospace engineering. Okay, he was like throwing these terms, and he was like, well, the thrusters and the airflow and the aerodynamics of the plane, and I'm like mind blown. And he was like, here, let me show you. So he takes me on Roblox. We go to this video game. I don't know, this like airplane, whatever. I don't know what it was called, right? And I saw his airplane and he flew it and it was crazy. And he was 9 years old. 9 years old. I mean, like, come on, Ben, right? I think that there's something that we can learn. I think we're so quick to judge. I judged Roblox, but I really think if we give it a chance, I think our kids could really teach us something valuable and our kids can learn something valuable. I want to know from our parents, what do you think? Do you think that Roblox is the end of childhood, or do you think that there's something that we can learn, or have you seen your kids talking about stuff that like this airplane concept at home? Let me know. Okay. Yeah, we have parents that are saying this now. Erica was saying that mine plays something called multi-craft that I have zero knowledge on how to play. By the way, Erica, and this goes to all of you watching this, I encourage you, play dumb. Seriously, play dumb. In fact, you may not even know, so maybe you are dumb.
Well, Jake, I was gonna say, I didn't need to play dumb.
Maybe we are dumb.
So, like I tell you, like it's so different from what kind of things video games I played as a kid. But what an amazing opportunity, especially, think about this, especially Jake, for a kid who goes into school every day and feels like they don't fit, or feels like they don't belong, or feels like they're less than, that they get to sit down and teach an adult something the adult doesn't know. Whether it's how to play the game, or how to develop strategy. I mean, there's so many teachable opportunities, and as adults, if we open ourselves up to those opportunities, and it's a gift, I think, for our kids to let us into their lives like that, and then reciprocate that gift by letting us teach us something and show us the way. That's incredible.
Wow. Well, I do have to just mention, we have about 10 more minutes before a surprise guest joins us. What? Yeah.
Who's this, Jake?
We have a surprise guest joining us in about 10 minutes. Okay. And it's perfect because, this person is the definition of creativity. And this person also struggled a lot in school and was very misunderstood. And all of our stories, and Ben, I would love if you could share some of your story also growing up in school, being neurodiverse also, because I think that, as our kids need people to look up to, right? Yeah, there's the Albert Einsteins and the Richard Bransons out there, right? Great. But we also need people like us. Our kids and our parents can relate to and look up to and say, wow, it is possible. Right. So there are ways that we can utilize our creativity to find our confidence. And I think that there's, also little hints that we can identify in our kids' interests that can foreshadow possible either careers or even just insights to how they learn. What do you think?
No, Jake, look, the more we know and are aware of who we are as learners, the more that's going to empower us, because there was this whole notion for a long time of like these learning styles, that somebody was like just a visual learner or just an auditory learner, and we know that research is long past. We know that's not true. But what we do know is that kids and adults have different modalities that they learn through, different types of experiences that they can interact with, different ways they can interact with those experiences or with their environment. And so if we can empower somebody to understand who they are as a learner and give them that space. And one of the analogies I use is when I first started to learn about cars and how to drive and how to work on motors,
right?
The guy that was helping me understand these things basically said, Ben, look, at the end of the day, there are three things you need for a motor to work. You need spark, you need fuel, and you need air, right? Three things. Well, Jake, people in our community, they tend to have a lot of spark, and they often have a lot of fuel. What they've been deprived of, so many of them have been deprived of, is the air to be able to let that motor run. And I think, that's what we can do. We can create environments. And so if we understand who we are as learners, we're going to be able to help somebody else help us find that air, or find that air for ourselves, right?
Wow. That's so true, because, look, I mean, I'm an alumni of the Southport School, well, formerly Eagle Hill. And I know that when I had the spark, right? I had all of it, but I didn't have the air. You're right. I didn't, excuse me, I didn't have the air. I needed some guidance, maybe someone else to blow that air so that I could be lit, I could be ignited, and it's so crazy you brought this up because last week I was talking about this of where we have to ignite the flames in our kids. I literally said this last week. We have to ignite the flames in our kids because at the end of the day, we're surrounded by darkness. And the only way you can see light, because light is invisible. The only way you can see light is in darkness. If I were to light a match right now in light, you wouldn't be able to see anything. But if I turned off all the lights and lit that same match, it'll light up the entire room. That's our kid.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and Jake, I mean, how did you feel before you came to Southport? I mean,
I'll be honest with you. So for those of you just tuning in, I don't know my story. I'll just give you a quick just catch up as to what happened. Okay. So I was severely misunderstood in school between grades 3rd through 6th. Okay. I had a severe learning disability. I was taken out of the classroom all the time. I was bullied by my teachers and by my peers. And I was being forced to read out loud in class when I was 3 grade levels behind in reading, when in reality, I was just an auditory learner. Okay. So I was paranoid. I wet my bed till I was 12. I mean, I'm telling you, like, it was a mess. Okay. So that was little Jake back in 6th grade. So my parents pulled me out of school and I didn't know what was going on. It was scary. It was really scary. I developed a stutter. Okay. I wasn't completing my sentences because every time I would talk, I would always get corrected. So I would just stop in the middle of my sentence. So when I went to the Southport School, I was angry. I was angry. I was frustrated. I was defeated. And because no one understood me. But the craziest thing, okay, and this is something that we do at Superpower Consulting, Superpower Mentorship. If you guys go check us out, this is exactly what happened, okay, of where I finally realized that for the first time in my life, as a 7th grader, okay, I remember I was sitting around in a circle with like 8 of my peers at the Southport School. It was like within the first week or two. I didn't know anybody. And we were going around and we were talking about what we did that summer. So when it came time to my turn, I was sweating. I was shivering. I was freaking out because I'm going to stutter or I'm going to stop in the middle. I was super insecure. So it got to me and he said, all right, Jake, your turn. It was Dave Silvestro, by the way. Okay. Love him. Okay. So he asked me, he said, Jake, your turn. And I was like, okay. My favorite part of the summer was going to and the girl next to me did the most miraculous thing. She completed my sentence. Disney World? And then the next sentence, the kid next to her, it was like as if it was staged, completed my next sentence. And it was the first time in my life that I realized that I was actually surrounded by those that understood me because they had what I had.
Wow. Right? Hey, that's amazing. I haven't heard that story before, and that literally gave me goosebumps. I mean, yeah.
But here's the thing, though. Okay, so yes, I was able to go to a school that was for like-minded individuals, but there's a lot of you out there that may be watching this, that may not be able to send your kid or just pull your kid out of a public school and put them in a school like the Southport School, right? So Ben, I would love if you can just touch on this for a little bit, because I have some ideas, but I would love to hear from you. What do you think? Because we have a few more minutes before our special guest comes, and I would love to dive in on it. Yeah.
Man, Jake, I'm wondering who the special guest is. I can't wait.
I'm nervous. I'm freaking out a little bit. Okay.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. That's funny. Well, I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, Jake, I mean, I think, look, what you described is about finding community. You found a couple important things you talked about. One, you found community. Two, you really highlighted the fear, the anxiety, the tension that you felt, the lack of self-esteem, the lack of self-concept, right? And one of the things that that is really inspiring, or I'm really excited about in the field of research, is there are more projects being done around this notion of anxiety, around mindfulness, around, giving kids safe spaces. Because if we can, help kids find community and a safe space in that community, reduce their anxiety, some of these things get ameliorated. Some of these things change, right? Like, some of the factors that caused you to stutter, right? That, you're incredibly tense, you're incredibly on edge, right? You were waiting to fail in that moment.
Oh my God,
Right?
it was crazy. Yeah.
So look, if you prime, if you're going on into the playoffs, right? If you're postseason, and you're going into the game saying, "Hey, look, I'm going to fail," right? Chances are you're not going to win that game, and I think that's the reality, right? So I think the opportunity we have, is to help our kids find balance in the types of things they're doing, right? Like we talked about video games, giving that space, but giving that balance, giving them the opportunity to try some different things. But an important thing is, helping them take good risks, helping them try new things in maybe communities that are different. And I'll give one really specific example in school, Jake. When it was time to pick a foreign language, there were 4 choices when I was at my school. There were 4 choices, ready? Spanish, French, German, and Russian. And my mom was, she was like, look, don't take Spanish. The class is going to be huge, right? And she was like, don't take French because that's going to be tough. That language, and look, I did take French, but she's right. The ending's going to be tough. And then she's like, and that leaves German and Russian. She's like, because, German, there's going to be fewer kids and it's closer to, it's somewhat close to English. And she's like, in Russian. And at the time I was kind of interested in Russia, right? So I take Russian. And it was so liberating, gave me so much air because nobody expected me to do anything with it, right? And I ended up going to study Russian. I studied Russian in college. And, it was one of those spaces where I found a community. I found that air and, I wasn't being kind of pounded with expectations. And, I couldn't get in the car and have my mom quiz me because she didn't speak Russian, right? Or, so it's finding those opportunities, whether they're in school or out of school, to help our kids take those healthy risks, to help them find those projects or, those extracurriculars, and to find, to find that community for them, because that community is just as important as, the types of things that we want them to learn in the classroom or in, outside of the classroom.
Right. And that's, I do think, and this is something that I say a lot, that at the end of the day, we could invest all we want in our kids, but if they don't have those tools to be able to self-regulate, to be able to advocate for their needs, to be able to know what they need in order to feel in control, right? These are all important life skills that are necessary, that schools may not necessarily teach. And I know that, for a lot of families that may say, well, I can't send my kid there, know that at the end of the day, if you can teach your kids how to articulate how they learn, how their mind works, to those that may not understand them, that is one of the most important life skills to know. In my opinion, I think, that's being in control.
Yeah, Jake, I think that's right. I think, and I think it's tough, as a parent, look, as a parent, you don't want your kids, you don't want to see your kids be hurt. It's the toughest thing as a parent. But we also know that we can only build resiliency as humans if we face challenge and then we find ways to overcome those challenges. And so a lot of parents, I talk to, are sometimes really reluctant to talk with their kids about their identification. If they've been tested, they're nervous, they don't know what to do or what to say. And look, every circumstance is different, but I think it's incredibly powerful to be able to have a conversation with your kid about this, because you know what, if it's like anything else, it doesn't matter if we don't teach it to them, right? They're going to learn it somewhere else, and what they learn might not be the right thing, right? If we do a bad job teaching, health and and reproductive education, kids aren't going to have the right information, and there are going to be problems, right? So it's the same kind of thing. If we don't help our kids understand their learning profile and who they are as a learner, they're going to write their own narrative about why that's the case. And I can guarantee you that narrative is not going to be pretty. It's unfortunate, but and you hit the nail on the head, Jake. If you're not feeling successful in school and you don't understand why, the narrative you're going to write about yourself isn't going to be one that's uplifting. I don't think.
Yeah, it's I think I think that having that ability to navigate some of those tough situations, it makes it, that much easier to be able to just go forth through different obstacles, right?
Yeah.
So
we're going to find out sooner or later, right, Jake?
Yeah. So Ben, tell me a little bit about the Haskins Laboratory for our families watching.
Yeah, so actually, so Haskins Lab is actually an epicenter of research around spoken and written language. So it's an interdisciplinary lab. It's formally affiliated with both UConn and Yale universities, and it's got center status at Yale. And it's really a network, a global network of researchers in cognitive science, neuroscience, genetics research, education research, really thinking about what's happening with the brain and how we learn around speech and language. And as an offshoot of that, what Haskins has launched is called the Haskins Global Literacy Hub. And really the objective of the hub, which aligns so well with the work we do at Southport, is really taking that research, understanding it, and figuring out ways that we can help disseminate that and help people have opportunities to leverage latest science, to leverage resources and materials. There are so many organizations out there like the Florida Center of Reading Research, or the Meadows Center, or the IRIS Center at Vanderbilt University. The Meadows Center is at University of Texas, Austin. There is the National Center on Improving Literacy. There are just so many free resources out there for families and educators. And unfortunately, what happens is there's a lot more bad stuff out there than good stuff, and sometimes the bad stuff looks a lot flashier than the good stuff. So, so part of our job is really helping people find, understand the science and why it's important to have evidence behind what we do and work with when we teach kids in school, and then also pointing them to how they can find resources to help support that. And so that's a huge piece of what we do at the Global Literacy Hub.
Wow, that's incredible. And again, if for our parents watching this, please don't hesitate to just ask questions away. This is a really good opportunity for you to, get feedback from an expert in the space. We did get a question here that from Erica that said, can you automatically, we got a few questions here. Okay, so can you automatically see a student at Southport have that moment of relief, which is the one I was talking about, and finally fitting in when they come to your school? Okay, that's a really good question. So what is the transition like? How do you, okay, let's talk about transition for a minute.
Yeah.
How can parents better parent their kids as it relates to transitioning either into a new semester, school year, or into a new school itself? Let's say 8th to 9th grade, because that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, look, transitions can be really tough for anybody. Change is something a lot of people are scared of, and transition oftentimes is a reflection of change, right? And we think about going back to school. Even if kids have been in school for years, it's still a change from what they're doing in the summer, and especially like you just talked about, if they're going from middle school to high school. And to answer Erica's question, I think what I think probably the most rewarding part of the work that we do is getting to see those moments, those collective moments of, of change. And sometimes they're small and, you see them build up gradually. Sometimes, they're kind of more aha moments, but it's like if you've got, nieces or nephews or grandchildren or some other kind of child in your life that you go a long time without seeing, and then you come back and you're like, oh my gosh, they're grown up, they're taller or whatever. You see parents send their kids to us usually because of academics. They're struggling in school. And I think the first thing they often see, or the first calls we often get, are about the change in their affect, the way they kind of carry themselves and the way they hold themselves. And so that's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see, Jake. And so, yeah, we definitely get to see those things unfold at the school.
Wow. 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 So our our special guest is having some technical difficulties getting on.
So while you figure that out, Jake, I'll answer the second part about transitions.
Yes, please do.
Look, there's some simple things that we can all do with transitions. It's like anything else, and I'll use that motor analogy again. Before you crank the motor and like floor the gas, you want to make sure that, it's up to temperature. It's, you're not going to damage the engine. Priming our kids for what those transitions are going to be like is really important. I think sometimes, we're nervous because we're nervous for our kids. And so we want to try to protect them and hold off on, preparing them for the transition so they don't have to deal with it. When in reality, the best thing we can do is set them up for success by talking about and helping them really kind of develop, a plan around what that transition is going to look like. So, it can be simple things like, gradual waking up earlier in the morning just to kind of get them acclimated for school, or literally just talking through them, okay, so what's your plan? How can we help you navigate a day? Another thing we can do for kids is think about what they can be excited about in the transition. Like you talked about going to middle school to high school. Well, there's changes in curriculum. Maybe even something as simple as saying like, hey, let's go buy like new school clothes or stuff to kind of be excited about going back to school, or there are a number of things we can do to help our kids be more comfortable with transition. But it's like I said, change is not easy. We know that, and transitions can be really tough. And we see it. Look, we see, especially come back from like a vacation, and it's true as adults too, right? You come back from that rest, and people are tired. Kids are tired. They might not be excited to go back to school. So it's finding ways and opportunities to, get them excited about that, or things they can look forward to, or setting some time aside to, make sure that they can hang out with you and decompress, because unfortunately, sometimes these moments of transition for kids are moments of transition for us as adults, right? Like if I'm a parent and I'm getting my kid ready to go back to school, and my kid has a learning or attention issue, I'm probably super stressed about that too. So it's important for us as adults to do some self-care, for us to get ourselves prepared for that transition. It's like putting the mask on in the airplane before we put the mask on, the person next to us or the child next to us, right? If we can do some self-care for ourselves as adults, then we can be really present when our kids go through that experience. And that presence, that's creating community right there.
By the way, I will tell you this. Transitions is one of the scariest parts of school, hands down. And, that's why the ways that we can get creative, the more our kids feel free and feel that they can express themselves, they can navigate these tough situations like transitions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
That's right.
So, yeah. Anyway, so with that being said, what we're going to do, because sometimes we got to roll with the flow because our friend here can't seem to get on Zoom. I'm going to give him a call on my phone, and I want him to get in here because it's important. Our audience has been waiting so patiently, and I want everyone to hear what he has to say. So shall we give him a call? I think we should. What do you think?
I think we give him a ring, Jake. I want to know who this is.
Let's give him a ring. Hello.
I don't mean to slow things down here. What's going on?
Oh, is this Harvey Hubble in the house?
Hey!
Who's this?
Hey, brother. How you doing?
Wait a minute, Ben, I have a question for you. Is this Ben and Jake?
That's right.
This is Ben and Jake.
Hey, I'm dyslexic.
You're dyslexic.
Yeah, it means I can't do technology.
I can see that, Hard. I can see that. But you know what? Everyone, this is Harvey Hubble. Harvey Hubble is an Emmy award-winning film producer with dyslexia. He made a film called Dyslexia the Movie, which all of you should go watch. Harvey Hubble is another really good friend, and he does incredible work in this space. So we were talking about, Harvey, the power of creativity, okay, and neurodiversity. And you're a creative, right? I think you're pretty creative.
Reckon. I mean, that's what, yeah.
Okay. What was that? Okay, so I want you, Harvey, to talk a little bit about being creativity and neurodiversity. And how did being creative help you gain your confidence as a dyslexic?
Wait a minute. First of all, I love both of you guys, but there's these questions like in creativity, but what is creativity? And there's creativity nowadays, and then there was, hey, follow me on this. Let's say I couldn't kill a woolly mammoth. Let's say that I was okay with the woolly mammoth. Let's say there was a bunch of us and we needed the woolly mammoth to, or we killed a sloth. Or I know we're going to get in trouble with the people who don't want us killing animals, but quite honestly, when we were hunter-gatherers, to be a hunter-gatherer, one of the things you had to do besides gathering was hunt. But there was another thing that happened. Somebody painted on the wall, and they painted on the wall that this is what happened with the woolly mammoth. Jake and Ben did this, and they did that, and it was painted on the wall. So maybe creativity is how do we give information in that time and space? Like there are people who are going to be able to translate things that happen on computers, and there are going to be people who translate things that happen on cave walls. Did I answer that question?
In the most Harvey Hubble way possible, yes. What do you think, Ben?
I would agree, Jake. I think that is an exactly accurate Harvey Hubble answer. And I think, Harvey, one of the things you just mentioned is something that Jake and I talked about toward the beginning, which is, this whole notion of creating things. We really can only progress. We can really only move forward, with whatever we're doing as humans, if we have the ability to create, if we give ourselves that creative space. Because if we don't, then all we're doing is reproducing. We're just kind of, doing iteration on the same thing over and over again. It's the creative element, like you just talked about, Harvey. It's the creative element that allows us, that empowers us to kind of leapfrog, to take those huge, to cross the, to be disruptive in a good way, to cross over into something entirely different. But we can only do that if we have the space to allow people to be creative and to develop that creative mindset.
Jake, I gotta break this down. I gotta interrupt. One day, my friend Ben, I go to Ben's school, and Ben has the school. I guess you guys were probably talking about it. And Ben's kind of a big cheese, kind of like a headmaster there. And he has these things called lockers. Wait a minute, hold on. This is the mind-blowing thing about moving forward. Ben has lockers without locks on them. Wait a minute. See, what happens, you go to school and you put your stuff, your hats and your gloves and your books and your stuff in these lockers. And sometimes kids, I'm just talking about dyslexic kids and in general, the combination lock goes, right to left to right. You got to circle around and you get a little confusing for people. So Ben is taking me on a tour because I love Ben. And he walks around and he's like, nobody has locks on the lockers. Now, Ben, if you could just explain why that is. But the thing is, Ben's thinking outside of the box. Ben is a disruptor who takes lockers and takes locks off lockers. Ben, why the heck isn't the box on your lockers?
Well, Harvey, there's a few reasons, and I think at least a couple of these. I think number one, look, a community is built on trust. And so if we start from a mindset that there's not going to be trust in a community, that immediately tells people that they're not going to be safe. And that's going to prohibit people from being vulnerable with each other. And I think Jake had given us a really great story about, an experience he had with somebody else helping him, supporting him in school. And I think, we want to create that whole notion of trust, and that, we have that expectation and that you're in a safe place. So to me, that's number one. number two, and you actually said this, Harvey, and I remember this when I was in middle school. I'll never forget, they gave me that combination, the master lock, right? It took me so long to figure out how to do that.
Nightmare,
Right?
nightmare. I still don't know how people do that, honestly.
And number three, I'll tell you, and I don't know if I've ever shared this story, but I'll never forget. I was in 6th grade, and we got this locker. We got the master lock. It takes me like a week or two to figure out. I remember bringing it home. And my parents helped me figure out, how do you do this, right, left. By the time I went right, left, I'm like, wait, did I go around twice? What was the number? So I finally get the locker working, and I shared a locker. They had to share a locker with a classmate, and so talk about transition, Jake. Middle school, going from elementary to middle school, 6th grade. I had moved districts, and they give me this locker with this kid Dave, and Dave and I shared this locker. I figured out how to get into it, and I would say maybe like 3 or 4 months went by, and this locker, Jake, was a wreck. I mean, I had like lunch bags in there of like food that had been sitting in there, and Dave was sick, and the assistant principal came down to my classroom, and he looked over at me, Mr. Banks, that was his name.
Oh, not the finger, Ben.
We need to get into your locker. And the whole way to this locker, Jake, I was like, my head was down. I was like petrified because I knew a couple things. One, there was like a 50-50 shot I was even going to be able to get into it with the combination, which luckily, of course, they had the key. They got us right in. And number two, as soon as I opened it, it was awful. So that's really the third reason. It's like anything else, like a closet in your house. We want to help our kids understand how to use that space, how to navigate, leverage their executive function skills, so they don't end up with that locker just like packed full of junk, that's got rotting food in it, like I did in 6th grade. That there's some visibility there, some transparency, so we can help them navigate that kind of responsibility.
So what do you think, Harv? You think Ben's creative?
No, that's the thing about you guys and why I love you guys is, that's exactly where we were going. There's probably a non-linear path to getting the creative, but Ben, as a kind of like problem solver, who can take care of other kids and make sure kids are safe in his school. Jake, that's the school that you and and we're separated by decades, Jake. But if we went to a school where Ben was the guy who's going to gently make sure that we're okay, and we know what to do with our lockers. One, get rid of the lock on it.
Jake, can you hear me? Hey, brother Jake, can you hear me? Jake, I can't hear you.
I think we're back. Can you hear me? Whoa. Some weirdness. I don't know. I don't know if we were too intense. I don't know if we had too much creativity. I don't know. I think we're still streaming. I have no idea. Are we still streaming? We may be. Hold on. Wait a minute. Guys, I'm freaking out. Oh, we're still streaming. Okay. That was crazy. All right. I don't know if I say any swear words if we were in the middle of that whole thing, but I guess we were just too intense for the power. Anyway, Ben, what were you saying, my friend? Go ahead.
Hey, I don't even know where we left off, Jake.
Hey, we're talking about navigating adversity, baby. Come on.
That is right, Jake. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, are you with us?
I am. I just don't know if I felt very good about telling everybody where I buried the money. Everybody knows, because I've never said that to anybody before, and that's like a lot of cash. So long as everybody heard that, I mean, I felt clean about that. And very good that, everybody knows that.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you, Har, for telling us where the money's buried. I appreciate it. Now we got a few more minutes here. Okay. So I want to be able to hit this baby home. My friends, if you have questions, I don't know what just happened, but just ask away. We got two powerful people on here, too powerful for the power, apparently. But look, we're talking about the power of creativity, right? Our parents are watching this. Guys, Harvey and Ben, we got parents watching this from all over the world. What can we leave them, right? As a Emmy Award-winning field producer with dyslexia, as a head of school who's literally changing lives every single day, right? How can we... Wait, let me finish my line. I'm almost done. Hold on. What can we leave our friends from around the world so they can take this and go to their kids and inspire them so that we need them because we need change in our world, and it's only coming by creative people. That's those with learning disability, neurodiversity. You know what I'm saying?
Let me go first. I'm the oldest. Let me go first. So, the pandemic.
What pandemic?
Happened not too long ago, and I was talking to Ben during it. Everything shut down, and this is a couple of years ago when everything first happened. And Ben said, "Ben, I'm not embarrassing you." We were literally at the darkest days of the pandemic when everything first happened, and Ben said, "This is our chance to rebuild." Remember when you said that, Ben?
I do, Harvey. That's right. That's right.
That's what I want to hear about. It's that's creativity, and that's the new world. That's as Gordon Sherman used to say, think 10 years ahead. But Ben, what's the schools going to be like for the parents that know that their kids are the young Jake Sussmans, the young Ben Powers? And they're going to come to a school like yours. They're going to find someplace like that. What's the thing that those parents need to know, Ben?
Harvey, I think, one of the gifts that you give us is your ability to help people tell their stories and for you to tell a story. And I think at the end of the day, one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids is the space for them to tell their story. And I think and look, I've got 4 kids of my own. We all have preconceived notions. We all have bias, right? We all think we know the answers sometimes. But the biggest thing I've learned from working with kids, and I've worked with kids with dyslexia and ADHD for over 20 years. The biggest thing I've learned is that if we give our kids that air, the space, and if we're present there with them, we can learn a whole heck of a lot about who they are and what their needs are. And again, as a parent, I'm racing around and I'm listening to my kids, but I'm doing a million other things. It's hard to carve out that space. It's hard to carve out that time. But Harvey, when I see you and, when you're, as you're shooting and putting Hopeville together, when I see that, what I see is somebody who's incredibly present, who's there being an active listener, actively engaged. And what happens is it gives people space and comfort to tell their story. And, a lot of times kids, they know what they need or they have a sense of what they need, and it's finding that space to let them either figure that out and share that with you, or be able to have that conversation with you. And unfortunately, I think as parents and educators, we're so worried about our kids. We want to drill them, to death with academics, and academics are clearly important. There's no two ways about it. We need people to be active learners, and we need people to learn and grow. But if that's all we're doing with kids, if all we're doing is kind of beating that into them and then taking them after school and quizzing them in the car, and that's not balanced. We need to find space to give them that air to breathe. I think that's the most important thing.
Wow. I love that. I love that. What do you think, Harv?
Well, I mean, that's why you have Ben, that's why we're asking Ben those things. But I mean, both of you guys are guys that, the reason I love you guys is because you guys have witnessed the fire, and you witnessed the fire, you understand. And the reason that parents love you guys is because they know and they see the potential. I mean, I don't know Ben's parents. I've seen your parents. I know your parents a little bit, Jake, and I know that all of a sudden, I know the struggles that you've gone through, that we went through, but you relate to with that. But the story is, if you do what Ben's saying, we're listening, you watch, you observe. I mean, Ben has 4 kids on top of the fact that he has, I don't know how many kids at his school. And that how big could Ben's heart be? Well, Ben has empathy because Ben has witnessed the fire. Ben understands the locker problem. Ben understands Ben is one of the, if you listen to people talking about Ben, and the headmasters all talking, Ben is a leader because he sees things. And he sees things from the children's point. And, Ben's talking about listening, but I know he can see, hear, so he feels it. And that's all we have to do with our kids, is we have to give them the kind of world that they can express themselves in. And it might not be the way you expect them to give you the answer, but we have to watch, we have to listen, we have to be there and see what is the gift of each of these humans that are going to create their own world and their own life. And we want to give them all the tools to make sure that it's possible for them to give the best possible world for themselves and to part of our society. Does that make sense, or do I sound crazy?
No. I mean, I don't think you could be any more clear, Harv. I think that both of you hit it on the head. And I mean, I don't know about your parents, and if you are just tuning in here, and if you have no idea who this voice is that's talking, this is Harvey Hubble, who all of you need to go check out, because Harvey Hubble is an Emmy award-winning film producer with dyslexia. And he is almost finished making a massive movie called Hopeville. And Harv, can you just let us know, what is Hopeville?
I just want to say, before Harv answers that question,
okay, go ahead.
I've seen a rough cut of this film, and it's incredible. It's really, really well done, and it tells a really important story. So that's what I want to say.
Awesome. Harv, what's Hopeville?
Well, the bottom line is, I mean, I couldn't do it without advisory groups guys like Dr. Ben Powers, right? The guys who walk the walk and witness the fire. But so let's just say that I made this film called Dyslexia. And just because I'm dyslexic, that doesn't mean I knew what dyslexia was at the time. And so I asked man on the streets, and I asked some of our friends who are neuroscientists and great researchers and master educators. So one of the things I learned, and I'm also talking to a lot of the coding dyslexia moms, and we go through the reading wars. And we know that there's whole language, there's whole word, there's whole language, there's evidence-based education. I don't know what that means. So what do? I go back to ask man on the street, and I go back and ask the neuroscientists, and I go back and ask the master educators. And then come to find out, what's going on is there's a thing called a reading wars going on. These reading wars are really affecting our children. They can disable some of the people because they're not teaching to how the child is going to be able to learn. Now, the crime in that is we know now that how people learn, that you could have identical twins and they could all learn differently. I'm just about to wrap this up. The thing is that if we explore that, when I was doing Dyslexia the movie, these mothers and fathers would say, hey, evidence-based education can teach 95% of everybody how to read. Wait a minute, I'm just going to play that back one more time. I'm just about to wrap up. 95% of everybody can learn how to read. Why aren't we teaching that to everybody? Why aren't we teaching the second language learners, people who speak their native language at home? Why do they have to be disadvantaged when they come to our nation, or poverty, which mimics dyslexia? Ben, back me up on this. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Hey, look, what I can tell you are the statistics, and those aren't pretty. In the state of Connecticut, 40% of fourth graders and 41% of eighth graders. I'm gonna say that again. 40% and 41% of fourth and eighth graders in our state are reading at proficient levels, which means that 60% of our kids basically are not meeting proficiency in reading, and that to me is criminal. And unfortunately, that statistic is pervasive across this country. And in a great state like Connecticut, where we have incredible resources, there's no reason that we can't be doing a better job training educators to be more effective and understanding the science and what evidence-based instruction is. And that's why I'm so excited about Harvey's film Hopeville, because it's gonna help tell that story.
Harvey, where is Hopeville?
Where is Hopeville? There's a couple different ways. It's funny how the English language is, but Hopeville is a district in Waterbury, Connecticut, which has a bunch of districts. I mean, Waterbury is just noted down. Hey, listen, for all my Waterbury friends out there, I'm just mentioning what the internet says. It's the second worst place in Connecticut to live. There's 108,000 people. They speak, between 50 and 60 languages there. Could you imagine being a first grade teacher or a kindergarten teacher there? Our Ben and Harvey's mutual friend and of course Jake's friends, Margie Gillis said, if you want to see how they do it right, they're doing it right in Waterbury. And one of the districts is called Hopeville. So when we went there, these guys, the cards you have to play are the cards that are dealt to you. And they're teaching kids against the odds to read. And you know what? I just want to go back to one other thing, and let's talk about the great United States of America. Let's talk about being capitalists. If we were business owners and 60% of our products were failing, the board of directors, which are mom and dad and school superintendents and everybody else, they have to look and say, wait a minute, we have 60% failure rate here. We have to do something better. We have to be able to teach differently. And in Hopeville, which is a district in Waterbury, Connecticut, the mayor and all the educators there are doing something differently, and they're going to evidence-based education. They are giving it, they're following testing, because I used to think those you teach, the kids are being taught for the test. No, the teachers need to know what Jake knows, what Ben knows, what Harvey knows, and they're going to individually raise you and help you. And that is good education. And that makes a difference between self-esteem, makes a difference between success, and it makes a difference between a reader who understands critical thinking and understands empathy.
Wow. Now, Harv, you and I are going to go live together in February. All right. So for all of you, what?
Ben, are you going to help us out when we go live in February?
You're not going to know if I bring Ben on, Harvey. It's going to be a surprise.
Oh, it's coming out today? I love that.
All right. So listen, for those of you watching, I'm bringing Harvey Hubble live, me and him on next in February. Okay. To talk about Hopeville. Okay. So, but this is creativity. Is this not right? This is what I'm talking about. Are you whistling?
This is the good, the bad, the ugly. It's like those shootouts,
Okay,
I like
but my friends, listen, this is what creativity is. This is what happens when you're able to take a vision in your head, in your brain, and you make it into a reality. And you're getting it across in a way. What Hopeful is going to achieve is to show the world a perfect model for education, how it should be, right? And that's Hopeful. And Harvey, you are a mastermind on how you're able to bring something like Hopeful to life. So I'm excited to watch it. Yeah. So listen, Ben, do you have anything that you'd like to say to our audience tonight as we wrap up?
Jake, I think what I'd like to say is that the best gift we can give our kids is the opportunity to develop their own voice, their own understanding of who they are, and to give them that air, right? And that's a tough thing to do. And as a parent, I think oftentimes we're our own worst critics and we beat ourselves up. And I kind of joke about this with parents. Every single parent who ends up at our door says the same thing. They said, I wish I had done this sooner, or, I wish I had been on top of this sooner. Parents, take a deep breath, right? As parents, we've got a big job. There are a lot of things that, come into our kids' lives and therefore our lives that we had no knowledge about, or we, like Harvey said, he had to go out to the man on the street to, to figure out what some of these things were. And so parents, don't beat yourself up. If you maybe haven't, gone about it the right way, or you're not sure what to do, or, if you feel like you've made mistakes, guess what? You are not alone. You're there with the rest of us, me included. And so, take tomorrow as a new day. Help figure out and find ways to create that air, that space for your kids to strike that balance, and and to be there as their champion. And that's certainly not going to fix everything, but it is going to change their environment, and that's a critical step in changing the conversation for them moving forward.
I love that. I love that. And if any of you are interested in signing your kids up for them getting their own mentor to help them identify and find their own creativity and their self-confidence, please reach out to me directly. I'll be happy to give you a discount for watching this. We are Superpower Consulting online, but on social media, we're Superpower Mentorship. So definitely let me know if you are interested. Be happy to give you a discount. And yeah, Harvey, would you like to say anything to our family watching?
Well, two things. I want to comment on both of the things that you guys, besides specs, that I love and respect both of you guys, because I've spent time and knowing and watching the magic with you guys. But what Ben said was something that I put into Dyslexia, the movie, was like, I interviewed my dad because, Dad, I'm making a movie about this. It's like, you gotta help me out here. And he says, so now he's looking at his 40-year-old son, and he's thinking about his 4-year-old son. And he said, well, we know things that we didn't know before. That's what Ben just said, and as every day we learn more, and when you realize that there's so much going on with the evidence-based learning, it's like, all of a sudden, yeah, okay, our kid could be reading below grade level, but like, let's, how can we help them, and what is their passion? One is to find out what their superpowers are, which brings me down to, Jake, you and I, we got this long conversation going on, like, I remember when I met you when you were in high school, I remember, you and the journey, and then I was like, well, Jake, what are you talking about with the superpower stuff? And then you asked me, we were at a Korean restaurant, do you remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
New York City. And I was like, well, Jake, hit me. When you blew me away with, like, asking me my superpowers, and I was like, this thing's like, all right, that's fine. I mean, if I had a kid, I would send them to one, Jake finding out, the superpowers. Ben, if I could get him into Ben's school, if I could drive him, if I was close enough to Ben's school. And we all know, people from back in the Kildonan days these other things where moms would drive their kids an hour, get the kids there, be down there in that area, drive the kids back. Because why? It changes their lives, and it changes their feelings of themselves. It changes their self-esteem. It changes the trajectory of their lives. Wait a minute, newsflash. We've been doing this for a long time. You watch the kids that we watched when they were young, and now we see them in college, and we see them successful at work. I mean, it's just, there's no way you can stop not cry when you watch what was going on with these kids, and you see that these parents got involved and they changed and they made a difference. That to me is the fact is it's never too late. It's never too late to be what you could be.
Well said, Harvey. Well said. That's right.
Wow. I am speechless on that one. And with that, I think that we're gonna call it. I want to leave on the high note on that. That was Harvey, I really appreciate you joining us. Ben, you are, again, both of you, dear friends and mentors for me. You both have changed my life and impacted my life in ways I never even imagined. So thank you. And, together, I believe that as long as we are together, and that's all of us as a collective, for all of you watching, we are a community. We are one, right? We are together through, I feel like it's a song, right? No, but we're together. You're not alone. Okay. You have Ben, you have Harvey, you have me, I'm like the older version of your kids. You have Ben who's working with your kids. You got Harvey who's giving a voice to your kids, right? We got us all working together, and it's all about us stepping up and do what we got to do. So with that, thank you for joining us tonight. Next week, I have another guest, so stay tuned for our post next week on who I'm bringing on, and really have a great evening. Don't hesitate to ask away still, okay? I'm always on Facebook. And yeah, have a great night and happy Monday.
Happy Monday, Jake. Happy Monday, Harv.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.